I'm Mike Gill. Tim Legler, ESPN, joins me right now. The Sixers will play the Raptors on Saturday. What kind of matchup is that? Let's bring Tim Legler in and get his thoughts on that and the NBA playoffs. Tim Legler, what's up, buddy?
What do you say, Mike? How's everything, man?
Everything is good, man. Never a dull moment in this area. You know that. You throw into the fact that I don't know that the Raptors were ever a potential opponent until like the last week of the season, and sure enough, that's who you get matched up with. And, man, probably not the one that they would pick if they were given the opportunity.
No, it's crazy the way this ended up working out. I mean, even if you looked at this a few weeks ago, it just didn't look plausible that somehow Philadelphia could drop down to 4 and that Toronto could climb to 5, and to do that simultaneously. Now, for the Sixers, it was so razor thin, the margin at the top, and the margin amongst those 4 teams at the top, and the way that they ended up falling into place, Miami, Milwaukee, Boston, and Philly, it's so razor thin. They could have literally ended up anywhere, and instead they slide to 4. And then for Toronto, they go 13-4 the last month of the season, and they end up 5. I mean, it's crazy the way it worked out, and unfortunately for Philly, it is going to affect them because now you've got to go north of the border, and you cannot take your best defensive player with you.
Yeah, let's start with that. Thybulle obviously said last night not vaccinated, and he will not play in any of those games. What is the trigger, the ripple effect of that, of not having him? This is already a team that's short on the bench. They went to Green to the starting lineup, but what does not having Thybulle for 3 of those games mean?
Well, listen, when you start talking about playoff series and you start talking about making adjustments, and as series go on, you take a guy and you give him the responsibility to go drape a guy that's hurting you offensively and have no help responsibility and face guard and take guys away and fight over screens and pursue on shots and contest everything and just hound and harass and reduce efficiency. That's what he does. And when you talk about guys around the league that can do it, he's about as good as there is. So to think that you won't have him now at different times in that series, on the road, the number of guys he would get to guard and that he could do effectively for long stretches, that to me is a major loss. I mean, look, he's making a couple of corner threes here and there. That's not going to hurt you either because we know that their bench production is not great. It's not going to be great in the postseason. They don't have enough shooting, but that's not even relevant. He could play an entire series if he's out there every night, Mike, and literally not make a shot the entire series and have tremendous value and help you win a series. And there's very few guys in the league you can say that about.
Yeah, they have, and this is a tough matchup because Toronto just throws a lot of wings at you. They have a tough roster for Philadelphia. I don't see where you have a good defensive matchup on the floor, it's in the starting lineup anyway. So this is one where they don't match up very well.
Yeah, no, they don't. And I mean, Toronto's been very confident against them as well. And in particular, they've had a difficult time. And Siakam, he's a guy that presents a tough matchup for them. And Van Vliet, who was out here at the end of the year, but will be back. He's another guy. When he gets hot and he gets into a rhythm, he can carry you offensively for an entire game. And that's exactly the kind of player that Thybulle can bother. Van Vliet is not particularly long. So Thybulle is a guy that can continue to pursue from behind. When he goes over those high ball screens, he can still be long enough to bother you from behind. So you see him out of your peripheral when you raise up for a 3. If he turns the corner on a ball screen, Thybulle can contract you and be close enough that he can still make a play on the ball as you go to finish something in the paint. He's just a pest. You saw the job that he did on Curry this year when Golden State came in. It was one of the best defensive games I've seen any player have on any individual. And that's what you need a guy like that for. So, look, you can't really overstate it. It's a massive loss. And it's almost surprising to me that a much bigger deal was not made about this, coming out in terms of the Sixers coverage over these last couple of weeks when it looked like, hey, this might happen. And when they asked them the question, Boston and Philly, they didn't answer the question, is everybody vaccinated? They refused to answer it. It raised red flags because I didn't know at the time. I didn't know about any of this. I'm trying to get information from inside the organization. Like, who are they talking about? Is there somebody that's not vaccinated? And so finally we all found out. And I just can't believe that there wasn't more of a I don't know, like almost like a panic on the part of the Sixers. Like, hell, we might end up playing Toronto in the first round and not have this guy because I think it's an enormous loss. I mean, I don't know if it's quite enough to say, oh, flat out, oh, Toronto's going to win the series. I wouldn't go that far because they still do have Joel Embiid, who will be the most dominant player on the floor. But it absolutely now makes that to me a coin flip series.
Yeah, I agree. Because the question, like you just mentioned, Van Vliet, what are you going to throw Maxey on him? I mean, Maxey is, look, he'll give you an effort, but he's not at that level where he's going to be able to get a – that's the thing. If Thybulle's having a rough night at the office, you could still say, hey, one possession, we need your best. They don't have a guy that says, look, we need the best defensive possession you can give us right here in this moment. That guy doesn't exist, right? You're going to put, what, Embiid on Siakam out on the perimeter again like they did the other night?
Yeah, I know. It's a problem. And, Van Vliet is one of those guys, like he's surprisingly explosive as a scorer. He strings together these big quarters where he gets hot and he just gets going. And next thing you know, he's got a 15-point quarter.
Yep.
And that's the last thing you can afford early in this series. Now, look, Thybulle will be on the floor for those first two, so that's important. I mean, I almost feel like it's imperative they win both of those games. And that's the pressure you've now put on yourself. If Thybulle's playing every night and you split the first two and you're going up there with a full complement of players for the next two games, you're not quite as worried about it. You think, okay, we're still okay. You don't ever want to lose a home game. But now I feel like knowing you're going up there without him, it almost puts an added layer of pressure on everybody on that team to make sure you get out of there going 2-0 before you head up across the border.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, you get these two at home, you almost have to get them because you won't have Thybulle for two, and you're going to have to figure out a way to win a game up there probably without Thybulle. And, obviously, the Sixers have other issues. When we last talked, everything looked great, and that was right after they played Minnesota and the Knicks. And I remember saying, well, you have two bad defensive teams. Let's see what happens. You're on. What has changed since those two games where it was like, wow, look how fast these guys have meshed? What has gone awry?
Well, here's what it sort of looks like to me, all right? When we first talked, and everybody felt the same way, and it was they went like 5 straight, and it just they weren't playing good defensive teams, but they were really seamless in their integration with the two-star players. It was really impressive, the fact that you bring in this ball-dominant guy, a guy that's got a higher usage rate than any player in NBA history when he was in Houston, and the way that he played, and you bring him in and pair him up with another star player, like you think, okay, this is going to be a feeling-out process offensively, and it just was immediately they clicked. So we all had such high expectations. What I think has happened is James Harden was really fresh, okay? He had not been playing. He had a long break. He came back from that, obviously revitalized, energized. He wasn't in Brooklyn anymore, and he didn't want to be there, and it was hanging over his head. He also physically got a lot of rest, so he felt good. He had a lot to prove. He came in, and everything went great, and they didn't play great teams. Well, I think what you're seeing now is the attrition on James Harden physically and the toll that playing the way he has played has taken on him over the years. He just doesn't look like the same guy. And look, if you take a guy that plays the way he plays and you say, okay, you're 10% less physically or 15% less physically, less burst, less acceleration, less ability to finish in the paint or in traffic. If you just reduce that by 10, 15%, you now have a guy that's guardable. You now have a guy that you can have rough nights. And that's what it looks like to me because and you could talk about technical things like blow-by rate and everything else like that. We get these numbers presented to us up here with our research department. It's true, though. His blow-by rate has come down to earth. He's a normal guy now off the dribble. And he is not finishing in the paint the way that he used to. He's not getting the same calls that he used to get as a result. So everything is muddled now for James Harden. And I saw an incredible statistic the other day, and I've been talking about his field goal percentage, but someone presented me with a number that said in the last 6 games, he has 2 more made field goals than turnovers. I mean, that is astounding for a player on this level. And, Mike, I hate to say it, but if James Harden doesn't play a hell of a lot better in the series against Toronto, they are going to lose that series.
Yeah.
He has to play great, not here or there. He has to be dominant. Now, Embiid can be the best player and should be the best player in the series, But James Harden can't have these games where he goes 4 for 15, 3 for 16 with a bunch of turnovers, and, okay, he gets 20 because he gets to the line a little bit. No, he can't play that way. And that's what it looks like to me, Mike. It just looks like he's not as good physically as he was at his peak in Houston.
Yeah, I was there Saturday, and I've seen him in Houston and in Brooklyn, and he just doesn't seem like he has that same explosion getting past you. He used to get past you. He could pull up. The shot's not there either. He can't get that shot. He can't buy a three right now.
No, and look, there's a combination of things there with that. One is what I just mentioned, which is, look, when you are a guard getting into your 30s, that's been utilized the way I shouldn't even say utilized. I mean, that makes it seem like the coaches did it to him. He chose that style of play. That's how he wanted to play in Houston. Nobody's ever dribbled the ball more or done more off the dribble as a guard in the history of this league than James Harden did in Houston. So at some point, you get up into your 30s, you're going to start to have less lift. And now you're talking about what is his game. He has no mid-range game. Okay, James Harden does not get to 18 feet and elevate and shoot over the top with a hand up like DeMar DeRozan or Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard or Jason Tatum or some of these guys. He does, Klay Thompson. He doesn't play that way. He is one of basically three things. He's either going to shoot a step-back three, or he's going to shoot some sort of a little floater at about 8 feet before the backline defender comes, or he's going to try to get all the way to the rim. That's it. And when you talk about those shots, next step for the floater, the three and the finishing at the rim requires fresh legs and lift, and it requires you to have that vitality. And it just doesn't look like he has it. He's not putting the front guy in his rearview mirror when he goes by him. And now everybody has to react to him in the paint, and he makes him a better passer. He's not winning that battle. And then when he goes to a step-back three, it's just not getting there. So I look at him right now, and I'm worried. I'm worried about how he looks. I'm worried about also, by the way, he's never played in a market with this type of fan and media scrutiny that he's about to get if he struggles in the beginning of this series. He's never experienced that. As bad as it could have gotten for him in Houston because he had some bad moments. Okay, have him go 4 for 15 in the first game of this series and have them lose at home to Toronto and watch what he's going to face. So the pressure of it and some of his past failures combined with this franchise that hasn't won in 40 years, what they just put the franchise through to get him sitting, Ben Simmons at home for 2/3 of a year to get this specific player. If he doesn't come up big, it's going to be something he's never even seen before, the level of scrutiny. So the pressure combined with the physical attrition puts him in this boat right now. The question that you and I don't know and no one knows is there another level in gear because of the adrenaline of the postseason that he can kick in and he can rely on to have better performances than he's had here over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's funny because you said, he wanted to get here, which he did, and they end up getting him. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm wondering how much he'll want to say I want to be here if the things don't go so well in these playoffs. Now,
couldn't agree more with you. Could not agree more, and that's why it was first reported he opted in, and then he came right out and said, hey, wait a second, I didn't opt in.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself,
well, on that front,
smart.
Legs, would you want to be making the decision on whether or not to bring him back?
Man, oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. So, look, it almost feels like they don't have a choice.
Right? It's almost like where they were with Tobias Harris and Butler. When Butler walked, they couldn't let Harris walk, so they had to overpay to keep him. Otherwise, they lose them both.
Yeah, and listen, you can even put that whole statement on steroids with Harden because you never said about Tobias Harris, look, this guy's going to lead us to a title.
Yeah.
You're talking about a guy that you went out specifically targeted, waited all those months with a two-time All-Star, and you can say what you want about Ben Simmons. The guy was the number one pick in the draft, and he's a 20-something-year-old two-time All-Star who's one of the best defensive players in the league, and collectively made the decision, we're just going to go 2/3 of a year and not replace that talent and let him sit at home because we wanted to see if at some point James Harden would become available as you got closer to the trading deadline. That's what they waited on, and they basically said, this is the guy that's going to be the difference maker pairing with Embiid to lead us to a championship. And so it's even more pronounced with Harden how much they are all in on this move. And that's why I say I don't think they really have a choice, because if James Harden opts in and then becomes a free agent and you don't re-sign him and you're willing to roll the dice that you can, and then you end up not being able to do that, look where your organization is at that point.
They're in an interesting spot, no doubt about it. And if they get knocked out in the first round, you're going to have other problems. Last night, I don't know. I mean, here locally, it's been played and talked about all day. I don't know if on the national level it reached that level, Legs, because I know you had a lot of stuff going on elsewhere. But Doc Rivers last night gave an answer that, for God's sakes, I mean, how about just say, you know what? We were really happy with the energy Paul brought us. I mean, the kid had a great game. What is that telling that poor kid? That you scored 25 points in 20 minutes last night, and the coach is like, well, we're not going to go on the Paul Reed train here. I mean, what kind of answer was that last night?
I'm going to be honest with you, Mike. I'm glad you brought this up. I did not know anything about what you just said because, like you said, if that seems like that was more locally covered. And I've been obviously cramming here, watching all these games yesterday and preparing for these matchups, so I didn't see that. And I think that that's just absolutely appalling. That any coach would do that to any player and immediately, like, shoot that down. And, like, what is he worried about? Is he insecure that people are going to start clamoring for Paul Reed? It's ridiculous.
The question, Legs, was, look, the kid Reed, what did he do last night? I mean, let me get it. His numbers were ridiculous last night. So, obviously, Jordan can't play anymore. He's cooked. Reed plays 20 minutes last night and scores 25 points. He's a plus 30. He's got 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 blocks on 12 of 14 shooting. The question was, hey, are you kind of like wishing that you gave him a chance a little earlier in the season? And he just goes off on, when the team is small, we'll play Reed. When they have a big 5, we like DJ. The coaches watch tape, and we know more. He said, I'm going to say it's slow so you get this through your head. That's what he said.
Well, that's listen to me. I'm going to tell you something, and I saw it earlier in the year with Doc Rivers when he gave an answer about I've earned it, I've earned the right not to be second guessed. So look, there's some insecurity here. That's the truth. I mean, the guy won a championship in 2008. He has that on his resume.
Yes.
There's been a lot of postseason failures since. There's been a lot of 3-1 series leads blown. There's been a lot of people questioning some of the things that have gone on with teams he has been the head coach of. So you have a guy that's a little bit, he's going to come at you defensively if anything is questioned. And I think in that situation, he answered that defensively in a way to say, like, we know way more than you do. Do not even go down the road of, wow, because we have a thin bench, wouldn't it be nice if we had developed him a little bit earlier and gave him an opportunity? Maybe we'd have another guy in the rotation we could count on. We're not even going to give that any life whatsoever. I'm going to squash that right now. And that comes from a place of being a little bit defensive because, look, I just said it. I was just on the air 15 minutes ago, and I just said it. When you look at this team and you look at the number of people that have immense pressure on them, and it's not just on the court, Doc Rivers, because of his playoff track record since 2008, Joel Embiid, as great as he has been this year, and I firmly expect you can just pencil in 30 and 15 are going to be his playoff averages, or 30 and 13, let's say, or maybe 35 and 13. Book it. I don't care how many games he plays, whether it's 1 round, 2 rounds, conference finals, or finals. Those are going to be his numbers. I think I now give him the benefit of the doubt, but the truth is he did not play well against Boston when they got eliminated in the postseason. He did not play well against Toronto when they got eliminated that year. He had issues physically in that series, so he had to answer the bell. Pressure. James Harden, obviously, he's had major moments in the postseason that defied logic. Like, what's going on in this guy's head right now that he's playing like this in such an important moment? Pressure. And then finally, Daryl Morey, with what they did to bring him in and how this all played out, starting with last summer when Ben Simmons made it very clear, I'm never going to play for the Philadelphia 76ers again, and they waited all this time to get this specific player. He's got pressure on him too. So, I mean, you talk about a team feeling that, it's this group of guys, and that's why it is imperative they get off to a good start in this series with Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's playing Jordan. That's his guy. He knows him. But Jordan has not done anything. And here's this young kid who's come in. By the way, he played well on Saturday against the Pacers as well. And the question is, hey, should you have given this guy a look? And to give that kind of answer for a guy who has not done anything is just ridiculous. Now, we'll see.
Hey, listen, Mike, real quick, just to tag that story. I was playing in Washington at the tail end of my career, and I was involved in a trade. Actually, myself and Ben Wallace were traded to the Orlando Magic for Isaac Austin. And listen, I was at the end of my career coming off an injury. Ben Wallace basically spent 2 years riding the bench for us and leading the league in like preseason rebounding every year. And then he never played him because we had Chris Webber and Juwan Howard and George Marasan and Rasheed Wallace. And we had all these guys. And then they traded him, and he goes on to become how many times? 4 or 5 times, multiple times
right.
Defensive Player of the Year, Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And they felt the same way. Like, if his name came up, they got very defensive. I don't tell us about Ben Wallace.
Right.
Like, well,
I'll tell you, though.
Maybe there's something to it.
The kid Bassey, when he's been given minutes, he's played well. Reed's played well. I feel like both these guys are like Rashawn Holmes. You just gave him away for nothing, and he was an active, athletic guy, and you're playing – Millsap and Jordan, and these guys are giving you nothing. But hey, what do we?
Listen, I'm gonna sum this up for you very, very succinctly, because there's so many factors that go into a series, and we know that there's so many things we talk about with matchups and everything else, and coaching adjustments and whatnot. It's very simple. If James Harden doesn't play a hell of a lot better than he's been playing, they're not going to win the series.
Facts. I want to lead with this. Period. I want to lead with this. Vogel fired today. Obviously, a local guy. Vogel, to me, is an interesting guy. He's in Indiana, good coach. They were a good team. He's in Orlando, bad coach, bad team. He wins a championship, and now he's the fall guy out there. What's the reason Vogel's out? Did the players not like him? Is the ownership a mess? What happened out there?
He's a very good coach. He's an even better person. He'll get another job, and he'll be successful in the NBA. There's no doubt in my mind. I think he probably is the most relieved person in the world that he doesn't have to coach this train wreck anymore, honestly, because – what happens when you put that brand on the front of the jersey combined with that name, James, on the back of the jersey? That cannot be a fun existence. Okay, it's great if everything is rolling your way.
Yep.
As soon as it starts to face adversity in those teams, and the shelf life with LeBron has typically been 4 years, and that's when everything starts to implode. So I don't think Frank Vogel enjoyed himself for 1 minute this year coaching this group. I don't think he wanted to coach Russell Westbrook paired up with, at this stage of Westbrook's, just didn't fit. They signed a ton of older veteran guys, no young legs, no defensive-minded players, nobody that cared about the regular season on that roster. There's no way Frank Vogel enjoyed this experience. He's probably, but what it comes down to is LeBron James is running the organization.
Jeez.
And if you get to the point that LeBron James decides he's not satisfied with how things are going, you are going to be the guy on the chopping block. They've had 5 coaches now since Phil Jackson stopped coaching. 5. And it's a very short shelf life, a very tight window with LeBron James. And they actually did win one, but now it's further from that than they are close to being relevant. So now you say, okay, well, we're going to make another coaching change. And LeBron can sit up there at his press conference and say, I didn't know anything about it. Nobody consulted me. Give me a break. Yeah. So we all know what it's about, and that's a very difficult job. It's a very difficult player to coach. And when things are going well, it's great. When it's not, it starts to go off the rails. The lack of leadership and lack of keeping guys together. I mean, I watched the end of the season, Mike. I called a couple games, actually, that I was at where LeBron's in street clothes, having just yucking it up, having a great time on the bench while his team's getting embarrassed on the court. It's such a bad optic, and it shows you where he's at as a leader. It's almost like his message was, well, I got nothing to do with this group of losers.
Right.
This isn't me. And so as a result, you feel this incredible gloom and doom and this weight of this season. And when it finally mercifully ended, immediately the Lakers are going to make a coaching change to try to let LeBron know, hey, look, we're going to do something to address this. And there's so many more issues. Beyond Frank Vogel, I think it's completely unfair this was laid at his feet. This is not the problem. The problem is their collective health of their star players, the fit of their star players, and a horrible roster construction with no role-playing, young-legged guys that stay in their lane and will go leave some skin on the floor and then let the star players take care of the finesse part of the game. Their roster stinks, and their older players can't stay on the court. They're veterans. They're stars.
Tim Legler, watch him on ESPN all throughout the week leading up to the NBA playoff. The play-ins tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. Sixers Saturday at 6 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Legs, we'll catch up soon, bud.
Yeah, let's talk some point during the first round, Mike. You got it.
All right, there's Tim Legler here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.